Namaskar, learners and listeners. I am Anita Devraj, and I am back again with another very informative episode for today. And my topic for discussion is going to be the Arab civilization during the medieval period. Before I start speaking on this civilization, let me help you recall about the medieval period in Europe. The medieval period cannot be called a dark period since so many important developments and growth in various spheres of life had taken place in different parts of the world. The most important institution of the society of Europe in the medieval period was feudalism. Now, the feudal system comprised a hierarchical of graded organization of political authority. An economic aspect of feudalism was characterized by serfdom and the manorial system of production. The feudal system was not a static one. It underwent patterns of prosperity and crisis. The period before the 10th century of Europe was marked by low level of cultural achievements. Cultural life improved, learning and intellectual development began to flourish after the 10th century. Now, in this particular video, I am going to discuss about the Arab civilizations during the medieval period. Islam was a new faith spread by Prophet Muhammad around the 7th century AD. It had simple doctrines. Islam spread to large parts of the world, and up to about 1500 AD, Islamic culture and society was remarkably cosmopolitan and dynamic. It witnessed great strides in cultural and scientific development. The coming of the Turks and the Mughals brought new ideas of sovereignty and governance in India. The Iktas, the Jagirdaris and the Mansabdari systems were important administrative innovations. The medieval period in India was a period of economic growth. The cultural and social life in medieval India was marked by a unique synthesis of different traditions. Arabia is a peninsula of deserts. Now, in this particular video, I am going to discuss all these points in greater detail. As I said earlier, Arabia is a peninsula of deserts. Before the founding of Islam, most Arabs were Bedouins, that is, wandering camel herdsmen. Their main source of livelihood was pastoralism and the produce of the desert oases such as dates. Craft production was very limited, trade was sluggish, and urban development minimal. In the second half of the 6th century, the economy picked up some momentum due to a shift in long distance trade routes. There was an ongoing war between the two dominant neighboring camps of Arabia, namely the Romans and the Persians. Because of these wars, Arabia became a safer transit route than others for caravans going between Africa and Asia. Now, this encouraged the growth of some important towns that took advantage of this trade. The most prominent of these was Mecca, which lay on the junction of some major trade routes. Mecca's position also derived from its local religious importance, since the Kaaba, a pilgrimage shrine, was located here. The Kaaba at that time served as a center of worship for diverse Arabian clans and tribes. The shrine was controlled by the Quraysh tribe, which played a powerful role in the economic life of Mecca. A brilliant civilization arose in Arabia in the medieval period, which influenced a large section of the world's population. It owed its emergence to the birth of Islam, which was a significant development in world history. Prophet Muhammad, who spread Islam, was born in Mecca into the Quraysh tribe in 570 AD. He was brought up by his uncle since he was orphaned early in life. He grew up to be a prosperous trader, entering the service of a rich widow, Khadija, whom he later married. Polytheism, or belief in many gods, was replaced by a strict monotheism or belief in one God, which became the basis for this new religion known as Islam, and Muhammad was hailed as a prophet. At first, he was not very successful in gaining many converts among the Quraysh, except for a limited few, including his wife Khadija. Meanwhile, representatives of another town in the north called Yathrib invited Prophet Muhammad to come and resolve their local rivalries. In 622 AD, Muhammad with his followers migrated to that town. That year of migration was called Hijrah, and the town was renamed as Medina. He continuously began to organize his converts into a political as well as religious community. In an attempt to spread his faith to Mecca, he and his followers conducted raids on caravans of the Quraysh. He finally succeeded in 630 AD and entered Mecca after defeating the Quraysh. The Quraysh submitted to the new faith, and the Kaaba henceforth became the main shrine of Islam. After the defeat of Mecca, other tribes throughout Arabia accepted the new faith. Islam had simple doctrines. The word Islam means absolute submission to God and adherence to faith. The followers of this faith are known as Muslims. Islam teaches that there is only one God. Prophet Muhammad is believed by Muslims to be the last and greatest prophet of God. They also recognize the prophets of the Jews and the Christians. Muslims believe in the day of judgment, when the pious would be granted eternal life in paradise and the wicked would be damned. Quran is the holy book of the Muslims, which is a compilation of the revelations that Prophet Muhammad was believed to have received from God. These steps include dedication to a life of morality and compassion, adherence to some set religious observances like prayer and fast at stipulated times, charity, pilgrimages to Mecca, and frequent recitation from the Quran. Apart from the Quran, the Sunnah or practices of the Prophet and Hadith or sayings of the Prophet also set the norms for desirable behavior among Muslims. In Islam, there are no intermediaries between the individual and God. Instead of priests, there are only religious scholars who have the authority to comment on the religion and religious laws. Islam also preaches equality of all. Islam has many similarities in doctrine and beliefs with Judaism and Christianity. Now, let us talk about the Arabian society and culture. Arab philosophy was based on the study of earlier Greek thought. Greek philosophy was cultivated by philosophers who believed in rationality. These philosophers, apart from the philosophical speculation, were also distinguished in studying natural sciences. They practiced astrology and medicine. Their astrology was based on accurate astronomical observations. In medicine, they not only studied the medical writings of the Greeks carefully, but went much beyond that. Ibn Sina, known to the West as Avicenna, discovered the infectious nature of tuberculosis and described several types of nervous ailments. Al-Razi, known to the West as Rhazes, one of the greatest clinical physicians of the medieval world, discovered the difference between measles and smallpox. Other Arabic physicians also diagnosed cancer of the stomach and prescribed antidotes for cases of poisoning. An interesting feature about the Arab people is that they excelled over all other medieval cultures in the organization of hospitals. There seems to have been at least 34 hospitals located in important cities of Persia, Syria, and Egypt, organized on remarkably modern lines. The Arabs also excelled in optics, chemistry, and mathematics. Physicists founded the science of optics and drew a number of significant conclusions regarding the velocity, transmission, and refraction of light. In chemistry, these people are credited with the discovery of various new substances and compounds like carbonate of soda, alum, saltpeter, nitric, and sulfuric acids, among other things. They were also the first to describe the chemical processes of distillation, filtration, and sublimation. In mathematics, the greatest accomplishment of Arabs was to bring together the geometry of the Greeks and the number system of the Indians. In fact, The use of the Indian number system spread so widely through the Arabs that the West named them Arabic numerals. With the synthesis of all this existing knowledge, the Arabs were able to make great progress in arithmetic, geometry and trigonometry. These Indian numerals are even now used all over the world. The Arab civilization was also noted for its literature, particularly poetry. The Rubaiya or Umar Khayyam is an example of poetry that is remembered to this date. Just as in other fields, Arab art also represented a beautiful synthesis of various styles like the Byzantine and the Persian. Architecture was the most important of the Arab arts. Examples of Arab architecture include mosques, palaces and madrasas. Its principal features were domes, minarets, arches, etc. In short, we can say that at a time when the West was lagging far behind, Arab civilization was at its peak intellectually and artistically. The establishment of a vast empire brought the Arabs into contact with diverse cultures such as the Arab, Persian, Turkish, Indian and African. With these diverse elements, it created a splendid society, leaving behind a legacy of discoveries and achievements. Now, let us do one activity. Recollect and make a list of at least 5 monuments you have visited or seen in books or magazines which reflect Arab architecture in India or as well as outside. What were the distinct features of these monuments? Where were they located? What were your thoughts on viewing them? Suggest ways to conserve them, and that is very important. Conservation of these monuments is very important because they are our heritage. Now, let us talk about a very important civilization, and that is our very own medieval Indian civilization. Now, in the previous videos, we have talked about the Gupta Empire. After the reign of King Harshvardhana began a prolonged period of political decentralization between the 8th and 10th centuries, during which several kingdoms struggled for supremacy. In northern India, the 3 major kingdoms were those of the Palas, the Pratiharas and the Rashtrakutas. Smaller kingdoms or principalities were established by the Rajput dynasties of the Chauhans, Paramas, Gahadwals, etc. In the south, it was the Chola dynasty that had control over most of the peninsular part of the country. This situation of fragmentation of political authority was greatly favorable for an invader like Mahmud of Ghazni. After several successful conquests in Western and Central Asia, Mahmud turned towards India. His Indian conquest began in 1000 AD, after which he made repeated invasions over Punjab as far as Kashmir and eastern Rajasthan, and then into the fertile area of the Gangetic plains. But Mahmud was not interested in establishing his rule over India. Mahmud's invasions were followed by the coming of the Turks. The Turks established their rule over most of northern India by the 13th century. The Turkish rulers were known as sultans and ruled from their capital at Delhi. Their empire is thus called the Delhi Sultanate. Its most powerful dynasties were those of the Khaljis and the Tughlaqs. Most of these rulers had to face the threat of invasions by the Mongols. Meanwhile, in the south, the 2 powerful kingdoms of Vijayanagar and Bahmani were constantly competing with each other for political supremacy. The coming of the Mughals in early 16th century marked a new era in Indian history. Politically, it saw the consolidation of an all India empire on a scale that had not been witnessed in India for a long time. Socially and culturally, this was a period of fusion of various traditions. Out of this fusion was born a unique tradition which could be seen in the social life, religious practices and beliefs, and in the various arts. It was based on mutual acceptance and a harmonious coexistence. Parallel to these centralized empires such as the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughal Empire, there flourished several smaller regional and provincial independent ruling dynasties. Some of these were the Ilyas Shahi and Hussain Shahi dynasties of Bengal, the Ahoms of Assam, the Gajpati dynasty of Orissa, the dynasties of Mewar and Marwar in Rajasthan, and the Shaki dynasty of Jaunpur. The reign of these independent regional dynasties witnessed the growth of strong and flourishing regional and sub-regional languages, literature and cultures. Now let us discuss the political institutions of this time. The coming of the Turks and the Mughals brought in new ideas of sovereignty and governance. In the first place, kingship itself had no clear-cut legitimate place in the Islamic conception of polity, which was based on the notion of a community of equals. Initially, power was shared between the Sultan and the powerful Turkish chiefs or nobles. But the reign of Balban saw a change. He elevated the position of the Sultan, so much so that he assumed absolute power in all matters of state and governance. The power of the Turkish nobility was considerably downsized. The Mughals established the power and prestige of the king at an unprecedented level. The Sultans of Delhi and the Mughal emperors made some innovations in the administrative system. The Mughal emperor came to be regarded as the emperor of India. In the Delhi Sultanate, military commanders were assigned territorial units known as Iktas. These territories were transferable. The assignees of these Iktas were not given ownership of the land, but only control over the revenues collected from them. This revenue was to be used by the Iqtidar, as he was called, for the maintenance of his troops. He would then be expected to provide military support with these troops whenever called upon by the emperor to do so. However, the pre-existing structure of control over land and the hierarchy in the landed system of the village continued largely undisturbed. The Mughal system was more penetrative, with control over the revenue and landed network going much deeper to the village level. The Mughals appointed Mansabdars, who performed military and civil duties. The Mansabs were actually ranks of position, which was first fixed according to the position of the officers in Mughal bureaucracy, and the military Mansabdars were mostly well paid through land assignments called Jagirs, which were frequently transferable. These Mansabdars were mostly paid through land assignments called Jagirs, which were frequently transferable. These were similar to Iktas, with the difference that while Iktas combined administrative charge, Jagirs did not. The Mughal system was crucially dependent on the smooth functioning of Mansabdari and Jagirdari systems. Now let us discuss the economy of this period. The Delhi Sultanate, as well as the Mughal Empire, was based on the surplus of agricultural produce of the peasants that were extracted in the form of revenue. In the Mughal Empire, particularly in the reign of Akbar, far-reaching changes were made in the system of revenue collection. Land was measured and land revenue was fixed according to the exact area of land. Fertility of the land was also taken into account. The cash value of the state's share of the produce was then calculated according to prevailing market prices, and the revenue was fixed in cash terms accordingly. The state encouraged payment of revenue in cash. This was a period of commercialization of agriculture, and the state encouraged cash crop production. The state also took a lot of interest in the extension of cultivation into zones which were hitherto uncultivated or forest areas. It gave various incentives to pioneer agriculturists. The state also advanced to peasants loans as well as revenue relief in times of crop failure. Now, trade and commerce, which had declined greatly following the period of the Guptas, saw a revival during this time. Urban centers flourished after a considerable period of decline. Inland trade increased in the 13th and 14th centuries as a result of this new urbanization. A vast network of roads connecting these urban centers came up, which also facilitated trade. Cities like Delhi, Agra, Lahore, Multan, Dhaka, Ahmedabad, Surat and Bombay rose in importance. The merchandise from Punjab was sent to markets in West and Central Asia. Political stability and relative peace established by the Mughals made it possible to travel with considerable ease among the cities of the empire. Coastal trade also flourished. There were a large number of trading classes, and commercial practices were of high standard and integrity. The Seths, the Bohras, and the Modis were engaged in long distance trade, while Vyaparis and Baniks dealt in local and retail trade. The Sarraf or Shroffs were money changers who issued hundis or bills of exchange. The hundi was a letter of credit that could be paid at a later date at the designated place. This facilitated the movement of goods from one part of the country to another, as it made the transaction of money over long distances remarkably easy. Now, another very important aspect of this period was its cultural and religious life. In the sphere of religion and culture, the medieval period witnessed a great synthesis of traditions. The Bhakti movement and Sufism in the religious spheres are examples of this. The Bhakti movement, which stressed on oneness with God through personal devotion, came very close to the everyday lives of an ordinary person. It stressed on love, purity and devotion rather than rituals and sacrifices. It questioned the caste system and the authority of the Brahmins. Bhakti saints like Ramanand, Kabir, Ravidas, Meera, Guru Nanak, Tukaram and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had a deep impact on the minds of the common people, and this influences continued even today. In fact, some of these saints developed large followings. For example, Guru Nanak had deep influence over the people of Punjab. His large following led him to find a new religion called Sikhism, whose followers are called Sikhs. In a similar manner, the Sufi saints also stressed on devotion and love as the only way to realize the divine. They preached tolerance and compassion. They lived lives of austerity and shared the sorrows and anxieties of the common masses. As a result, their influence over the masses, both Hindus and Muslims, was very strong. There was also a lot of interaction between the Sufis and the Bhakti saints, and exchange of philosophical ideas took place during this time. Both traditions, in fact, acted as a bridge between the two communities. Now, I assign another very important activity to you. Try to find out if any Bhakti and Sufi saint lived in your state or your neighborhood. Now, one very important example will be Nizamuddin Aulia Sahib in Delhi. Easy? Try to find out more about them. Can you visit their shrine, if any? What did you see? Now, write your experiences in about 80 to 100 words. Collect pictures of at least 3 to 5 Bhakti and Sufi saints each. Find out about them and their teachings. Do you find similarities and differences in their teachings? Reflect and write a few lines about each of them. What did you learn? Do you find the teachings were relevant? Share your thoughts with family and friends. Come back to our discussion. Language, literature, art, architecture, music and dance also bore out this trend of synthesis between different traditions. In the area of language and literature, classical languages like Persian and Sanskrit flourished, but the real remarkable development was in the growth of regional languages. Under the Mughals, paintings was organized in the royal karkhanas and painters were on government payroll. The Mughal school of painting represented a complete assimilation of the Persian and Indian styles. This, to some extent, was a result of the fact that the artists of the school brought with them elements of the various traditions to which they belonged, like Rajputana, Gujarat, Malwa, etc. Some famous painters were Daswant, Baswan, Mukund, and Keshav. The supervision of the Persian masters like Abdul Samad and Sayyid Ali brought in an element of Persian style as well. Manuscript illustration was another important landmark of the Mughal paintings. Another fascinating aspect of cultural life in medieval India is visible in its Indo-Islamic architecture. It is characterized by the adaptation of Indian resources, expertise, motifs, and designs to Persian styles. New features like the arch and the dome were combined with the use of Hindu motifs like bells, lotus, swastika, and kalash. The Qutub Minar, the Lahi Darwaza, and various monuments of the Tughlaq period, like the tomb of Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, are fine examples of architecture during the Sultanate period. The monuments of the Mughal period reflect a deeper sense of fusion and assimilation of Indo-Islamic styles. For example, the monuments in Fatehpur Sikri, like the Panch Mahal, Birbal's palace and Ibadat Khana, as well as the tomb of Humayun in Delhi, Akbar's famous tomb at Sikandra in Agra, Itmaduddaulah's tomb also in Agra, and of course the Taj Mahal are outstanding examples of Mughal architecture. Music was also patronized by most medieval rulers in India. Indian system of vocal and instrumental musical interfaced with Arab, Iranian and Central Asian traditions of music. New ragas came to be composed. The Bhakti and the Sufi traditions also gave an impetus to new devotional styles of music. The medieval period of Indian history, quite distinct in its characteristics of political, economic and cultural life, was thus another important outstanding period after the ancient period. Now, I am going to ask you some questions. Can you tell me why Makkah arose into prominence? Can you enlist at least 5 fields in which we can see the contribution of the Arab civilization? Which dynasty in the south held sway over most of the peninsular India? The Mughal system was based on the smooth functioning of which particular system? Who were money changers? Who issued hundis or bills of exchange? The Bhakti movement stressed as oneness with God. Through which aspect? With this, I end up my discussion for today. We shall meet again with another valuable episode on another video on another day. Till then, thank you.